And the research tells us that that actually is the most important thing, the relationship between the parent and child. So parents put a lot of emphasis on getting it right. Sometimes feel they want to be the expert before they start a conversation with their child about this. But actually the thing is to build the warm, loving, connected relationship where you can have those little conversations that we all have in daily life.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to HSE Talking Health and Wellbeing. And today I'm talking to Moira Germaine, who is the Education and Training Manager for Sexual Health and Crisis Pregnancy Programme. And we're here today to find out all about the new resources that have been published on making the big talk many small talks. Moira, thanks a million for coming into us.
Thank you very much for having me, Fergal.
I'm delighted to see these new resources launched last year for parents. So before we get into them, you must be delighted to get these project over the line. There must have been a lot of work.
Oh, it's been several years of work to kind of develop the suite of resources to the stage where they are now. Because as you know, there's a few booklets and there's also a video collection, and it involved a huge range of people. Obviously, the people in the Sexual Health and Crisis Pregnancy Programme, but also a huge range of our external partners. I couldn't name them all.
And then I suppose the whole area of relationships and sexuality education is a really hot topic at the moment.
It is, and for a very good reason. I suppose for a very long time it was a topic in Ireland that was taboo, that people didn't really deal with it or dealt with it in a very negative way. And I suppose people are more and more coming to the realisation that actually your sexuality well-being is a positive resource in their life. And they want to support their, parents and teachers and anyone who works with young people wants to support them to be as well and as healthy and as happy in terms of their sexuality development as they can be.
I suppose when some people hear the word sexual health, they'd usually think that traditionally that'd be about protection from STIs. I know that was a big message when I was growing up.
Yeah.
It's still a big message, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But there was less about kind of education and prevention. And that's really your department, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it is about those things. None of us would be saying that they're not important, because obviously we want to support young people and adults to take care of their sexual health and to avoid or prevent risk, and then to look for treatment if necessary. But that's a very reductive notion of the whole of sexuality well-being. Our National Sexual Health Strategy actually recognises that. It talks about it in that much broader sense.
So sex isn't, or sexuality isn't just about the act of sex. There's loads and loads and loads of stuff in and around it that we need to get our heads around.
Absolutely. And sex, obviously, for the vast majority of people is an important part of their life. At a time, like in their adult life, when if they choose to be sexually active. So it is important. But it is not the only aspect of their sexuality well-being, and their sexual activity really should be integrated into the whole of their sexuality well-being rather than being seen separate or different. And that's part of the problem of, I suppose, in the past, because it was only seen about sexual activity. It was shrouded in mystery and taboo and perhaps
under
even
the carpet
shame.
a bit.
Yeah. So if we see it much more it's about who we are, and that at a later time in our lives, our sexual activity is an extension of that, then it's much easier to address.
So you're developing resources for parents, but a lot of children would get information in schools as well. So why are the HSE kind of doing this work?
Yeah, absolutely. There's always this kind of tension between should this sort of education and information and support be in the schools or in the parents or with the youth work sector or where? And the reality is it should be everywhere. Because children and young people they live their lives in different places, in different settings. They spend the vast majority of their time in the home, from the time they're born. They spend a huge chunk of their time in the schools, and then they spend another part of their time in the community. And the more they're getting these kind of positive messages and supports from all these different trusted adults, the more that they'll be able to figure out a way to be healthy in their sexuality, as they develop.
Yeah, I like the way you said that, that the home is key. That is your ultimate healthy setting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the title of these new resources, Making the Big Talk Many Small Talks, like it's the small conversations that are probably more amenable to the home situation, sitting down watching telly or around the dinner table or, where opportunities might just come up where something is on the radio or something on the television where people can actually talk about relationships or sexuality in a more accessible, softer, normal way, to normalize it, I guess. That's what you're trying to do, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure sometimes parents get really overwhelmed by this, the notion that suddenly they're meant to become these sexuality educators on top of everything else they have to do. And what we're trying to say to parents is you're already doing a lot of this. You just don't know it, because you've probably seen kind of sex education. It's been something completely different to all the stuff you're doing at the moment. But, from the moment a child has been born, the parent is looking after their emotional health, their bonding, their connection, how they develop friendships and relationships with other people, looking after their, the development of self-esteem. They're doing all that already. And what we want to say is that is actually part of your child's sexuality development as well as their emotional development and their physical development. So we want to kind of, I suppose, make parents aware of what they're doing already and then build in the bits where they might find it a bit more awkward, talking about body or relationships or, later on maybe sexual activity and how young people can protect themselves and be healthy.
So and how does the education setting complement the work going on in, like, we're trying to support parents with these resources? How was the education and the youth work setting you mentioned there as well? So if they were working in concert with each other, or how was that dynamic?
How does it work?
Best case scenario, how does it work?
Yeah. Well, they do different and complementary things. So you said already that in the home, the parent is there with their individual child or children, and they know that child really well, and they know what's going on in their lives. And, they're there in those informal moments where they can gently raise issues or have a chat or whatever. The school setting is very different. The young person's in a classroom with maybe 20, 30 other young people. So it's a great place for the young people to get a wider notion of some of these topics and to have a safe space to explore other people's opinions and perspectives in a facilitated, safe way, because the teacher is obviously there. So that kind of supports and reinforces some of the healthy messages, hopefully, that the young person's getting in the home. So it's different and it's complementary. And then in the youth work sector, they get a different experience of having a safe space to explore these issues in a less formal setting with a trained youth work facilitator. But, the more young people get these messages and get different places to tease out ideas, perspectives, values, attitudes, the more that they'll be supported to develop their own.
I heard, I think it was Anya from the Parents' Council at the launch event. Anya talked about values, that, that you need the parents, because the values might be different. So if you're getting facts here and facts there, and you're picking a bit up off media, all these sources of information for young people, but like, you need to get your value base from your home. That's why it's important to, give the parents the power to deliver on this. Yeah,
absolutely. Sometimes, parents might wonder about, do they kind of bring their values into it? And of course they do. We bring our values into everything.
Yeah.
But it's even more appropriate in the home. But the work of parents around values is, as the young person, they go through childhood, you want to instill in them values about healthy relationships and kindness and, right and wrong and decency and all those things. And as the child becomes a young adolescent and then a young adult, the work of the parent is to support them to develop their own values. So it becomes more of you sharing your values in a kind of a supportive way rather than an imposing way, hoping that the young person is going to use that information and their experience of being hopefully in a happy, healthy household to develop their own values.
Yeah. So their self-esteem or their confidence is a key to their health behaviours across the spectrum. So absolutely. Sexuality is just another one of those things that we need to be maybe putting more words behind, or putting that more literal conversations about. Maybe we've shied away. Do you think that parents have just been afraid of this, or is this like a hang up that parents are bringing?
It probably is, and that's not to blame parents. That's where our society, and I have to say not just Irish society, many societies have come from. That this is somehow taboo, it's somehow silent, it's somehow shameful. And a lot of adults we've talked to over the years, because a lot of my work would have been in training around sexual health, would talk about their own experience of, finding out about reproduction, where babies come from, or sex or periods and stuff like that. And it's very often with a bit of laughter to start off with. And then if you just allow a little bit of time and go deeper, it's with sadness.
Yeah.
And it's not to blame their parents. They did the best they could with what they had, but they know that they would like something better and different for their child, something more positive and supportive.
So the key to this is not making it a big talk, and I must say that I lived in fear of my parents. Like when I got the birds and the bees message off school friends in national school, I was like, are you serious? This is what's going on. I couldn't believe it. But I feared it was a big fear that my parents were going to give me the big talk. And I didn't want it. So the whole message, and then I suppose it leaked out over different years, like they'd say this or that. You were getting the message, or they were certainly getting the message across that they thought, they kind of acknowledged that I knew the basics already. You know what I mean? So it was it was leaking out.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to see this. The key message to your resources is nearly leaking it out, or kind of don't put too much emphasis on this big talk. Make this normal, bite size, and often.
Absolutely. Can you imagine, you've just described the pressure that you were feeling. Can you imagine the pressure they were feeling, gearing themselves up to do the big talk? So that is really key. And actually the research that Catherine Conlon's team did with parents of 4 to 9-year-olds, which was the research that kicked off this project. She talked to about 100 parents, and that was one of the big messages that came up. One parent put it beautifully. They said, layer, don't load. So just kind of layer kind of those conversations over the years as they come up, and be thinking about where your child's at and where they're likely to be in terms of their sexuality development, what they might need to know, because they won't always ask the question. It's not always about waiting for the question. It's about looking for cues. And
I think that takes us nicely into looking at some of these resources, specifically like the 4 to 7-year-old resource seems like very light, and obviously they're really small kids, so you're not going to get, but you're just introducing some names, and the Flower Power book is part of that suite. Can you tell us a bit about your approach, but that young child?
Okay, so this is the parent resource for parents of 4 to 7-year-olds. It's a booklet, a guide for parents, and it's a little storybook, Tom's Power Flower. And what it does, as you say, it's very gentle, very incremental. It just sets out some of the common kind of issues for that age range and what parents might do around it. So it talks a little bit about how you might help your child to name their body parts, including their genitalia.
With their real names?
Yeah, with the correct, I can't even say it, anatomical names. And that's not just because, we want to be all scientific, but that's because it gives people a shared language to talk about. And it also takes away the message that somehow that's different to the rest of your body, because, with all the kind of cute little names, that people call, it can be very individual to families. So this gives the young people a shared language. It gives them a language that they can describe their bodies, and they can describe them if something's amiss, in a way that adults are going to understand and other people are going to understand, and they can describe them in a way that makes it possible to have a conversation in the classroom.
So the videos that you've launched as well, they're for this kind of age cohort as well. So I was very taken by these because they're lovely animated videos. They're so accessible. We might have a listen to one of them where it's like a group of parents meeting a facilitator. It's like a parenting group, and the type of conversation they have around the area.
Welcome everyone, and thanks for coming. I know it's tough for parents to get out sometimes.
No, I think it's great to have this kind of support when it comes to talking to our children.
To be honest, I didn't exactly choose to be here. I mean, what does sex have to do with our 3-year-old? I didn't learn about this stuff until secondary school, and that was fine with my parents.
A lot of us, including me, had that kind of experience as kids. What do the rest of you think?
I grew up thinking that sex was something shameful, but that's wrong. I can already see that our 2-year-old is curious about her body. It's pretty funny.
And isn't it better they learn from us rather than other kids who only think they know what they're talking about because their parents don't talk to them either?
My 9-year-old's friend actually told her just last week that girls eat their tampons. She saw it online.
Okay, but still, how do you know the right thing to say? If you get it wrong or if it's too much too soon, couldn't that be harmful? For many generations, adults thought that shielding children from learning about sexuality was the safe thing to do. The truth is, better educated children are way more likely to make better decisions as they grow up. About everything, including relationships and sexuality. But with sexuality, there's still a double standard that says knowledge could be harmful.
I know you're right, but I'm so embarrassed by the words I'd have to say.
And isn't it better for mothers to talk to daughters and fathers talk to boys?
Children, especially young children, look to grown-ups for information, simply because we're trusted adults, regardless of characteristics like gender. And one of the best things we can do is give the message that everybody can talk and learn from each other about this subject.
I get it, but I still don't know if I can say the word penis in front of my child.
Embarrassment is one of those catchy feelings. And most of us caught embarrassment about sexual things from people around us when we were very young. So we never get to find out that these words are just words and that it's really healthy and okay to say them out loud.
You're right. Why should I be embarrassed to say testicles or erections?
Nipples?
Masturbation.
Vulva.
Clitoris. Ejaculation.
Scrotum.
Vagina.
Penis!
Good job, everyone. And with a little practice, I think you guys will be ready to make the big talk, many small talks, and become the askable parents that you want to be.
Okay, so one of the things that jumped out at me, or my favourite term from that video, is that askable parent at the end. I mean, like, we're all worried about our kids for different reasons at different times. They're going through different things. But to think of yourself as a parent who your child can come to, that's really the sweet spot, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's to be an askable parent, but it's also to be a tellable parent, just to, like, our suite of books are called Making the Big Talk, Many Small Talks. And it's a nice title. And obviously, it's playing on the old fashioned big talk notion. But actually, it's not so much about the talk, it's about a conversation. As soon as
listening.
Yeah, and completely about listening. Because you learn as much from your child as they'll learn from you, just different things, So it is about that relationship. And the research tells us that actually is the most important thing, the relationship between the parent and child. So parents put a lot of emphasis on getting it right. Sometimes feel they want to be the expert before they start a conversation with their child about this. But actually the thing is to build the warm, loving, connected relationship where you can have those little conversations that we all have in daily life. That's the key. The rest of the stuff is learnable. You can find it
yeah. Well,
everywhere in the books.
You can find it on sexualwellbeing.ie.
You can indeed.
And you can order the resources from healthpromotion.ie as well.
Absolutely.
And one of the other things that touched on in that video was the embarrassment. These parents are kind of maybe like, they wanted to delay the conversation. And sometimes I sense that, we delay it and then we think, they're grown up.
Yeah, they know everything.
They know it all. So, geez, they're on the internet more than I am. So they know it all.
Yeah.
Don't ask me, so we kind of let ourselves off the hook a bit. Mm. So, is that a big concern for parents, that all these sources of information and that the internet is just too big?
Yeah, sometimes parents, and particularly when you get to the older years, they just kind of feel that they're redundant, that they don't matter anymore. But actually, all the research, international and national, tells us that young people want to talk to their parents and parents want to talk to young people.
Yeah.
We just need a bit of support to do it. So, yeah.
And the embarrassment piece can be got over. We have to get over ourselves a bit, jump it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
You must come across that all the time.
Of course I do, and like, I've been working in this area, it feels like a million years, and I still get embarrassed about stuff. Embarrassment, there's a lot of emphasis put on it, but actually that's not the biggest issue. That the more you do it, the less embarrassing it is. And sometimes it's actually good for young people and parents to acknowledge that there are difficult conversations that are still worth having, but it does get easier.
Yeah. Moira, can I ask you in relation to dads and fathers? There's a huge evidence base about, fathers and boys and, having a good relationship been a kind of a huge protective factor for boys. But when it comes to these kind of RSE chats, and like are we expecting the mothers to do the hard yards, or is that just the way it used to be?
Traditionally, that is the way it was expected, that if anyone did it, it was mum. And to some extent, it still is. And that is something that we're wanting to change. And it's not to blame fathers, because obviously, I suppose societal expectations didn't require it of them. But as you say, we know that, young men need that support from their dads. But also, all children need, if they're being co-parented, need the input of both parents, because they bring something different but complementary to the conversations. So
it doesn't have to be the daughter and the mammy and the son and the father.
Not at all. And of course, many families don't have that, for whatever reason, just don't have that. So there's nothing that would actually, mean that a father couldn't have a conversation with, his daughter who's starting menstruation or whatever. It's just that they need support to do it. But the research tells us that this is still an issue, that fathers are less likely to talk to their children, and that their children, and particularly their sons, would like them to. So it's really important that we say to dads that you're needed, you're wanted, and you can bring something very special to the conversation.
Yeah, maybe we should try and build that into the next Men's Health Week as a message for fathers and dads, just to bring them on board. Yeah, that's great. Let's go back to the actual resources now and go on to the 8 to 12-year-olds. So you've got the Making the Big Talk, Small Talk guide for parents for that age group. And also we have Busybodies, those books. Can you tell us a bit about those kind of two resources?
Yeah, absolutely, because they kind of work in tandem. So 8 to 12 is kind of the years coming up to puberty and the years when puberty begins. So the 8 to 12 booklet for parents deals with some of those issues about the physical changes during puberty, but it also goes further. It talks about some of the adolescent changes, the changes in kind of the social, emotional kind of piece for young people, and what parents might do in order to make those transitions easier for the young person and for themselves. So, it touches on a wide range of topics around menstruation, around growth and development, around wet dreams, all the things that we've kind of avoided talking about.
Yeah. And the booklet, the Busybodies, it's like the subtitle, a booklet about puberty and adolescence for you and your parents. I love that.
Yeah.
Like, kids, pick this up. There's lots of interesting information in this. And again, it touches on those sensitive, private things that you haven't had a lot of conversation about, or you might be picking up information from all sorts of sources. We want to have trusted source of information and provide that to parents and young people. And this Busybody resource has been around for a while, but when was this?
This was updated in 2020. So it's a resource that was first developed by CHO4 down in Cork and Kerry, again with a wide range of external partners. And then we partnered with CHO4 to redevelop it in 2020, again with lots of input from lots of expert groups. And it is used widely in homes and it's used widely in schools.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And we would, obviously, this booklet for young people, but it's really, really good if parents and young people can work through some of it together. And I don't mean from starting on page 1 and working through to the end, a bit like an excruciating form of your dreaded big talk.
Absolutely.
But, dip into it and do little bits at a time when it's useful.
Again, it should be about the house, maybe. Accessible resource.
Yeah, and different people will use it in different ways. And that's what it is. It's a resource. We're not really here to tell parents how to parent their children. We're here to give them resources and supports that they might choose to use. So these build up to then the 13 to 18-year-old resource. So you're getting into a different realm of detail, I guess. Oh, absolutely. That's, And 13 to 18 is a huge age range in terms of young person's development. At 13, they're still, in that very early adolescent stage. By 18, they're an adult. Yeah. But you're still a parent, as I'm sure, many people know. You're a parent forever. Yeah. Absolutely. So again, it deals with kind of some of the general developments, and it breaks it down into kind of the 13, 15 age range. Breaks it down a little bit more. So what are the common developments in that age range? And then what are the common developments in the kind of the other end of that age range up to 18? And it offers parents advice and supports around things that they might consider and things that they might do. And it's broader than just, we talked about, the usual suspects when it comes to sexual health. It does talk about, the young person, emotional health, their body image, their relationships. It talks about consent. It talks about...
it's great to see that consent is another live,
very
trending topic all the time. So it's great to see practical advice around that. Because sometimes I think, just because there's a lot in the media about it doesn't mean that we all know how to address this with a 15-year-old or an 18-year-old. Absolutely.
But you'll actually find that consent is actually kind of threaded throughout the books.
Yeah.
Because...
healthy relationships. Yeah.
That's it. The basics of consent is around, people kind of establishing their boundaries and being respectful of other people's boundaries. And sure, we do that with young children about, when they can touch and when they can't touch people, when, about playing, about taking turns, about asking, not taking other people's property. These are all consent messages that can be built on as the young person grows up. And then, of course, in this age range, we're coming on to the area where we're talking about kind of consent in terms of maybe a dating relationship, or later on maybe a sexual relationship. So it's kind of a natural progression. So the word consent can throw people into a bit of a tiz, but actually it's a progression of the work that parents have been doing all the time. And it's just, sometimes people can almost think that their sexual activity and relationships are separate to who they are as a person. But if we want our young people to be kind, decent, caring people who respect the dignity and rights of others, of course we'd expect the same in terms of their sexual relationships.
They have to see the big picture.
Yeah,
that's one of the great things. I think that, the resources do kind of show the big picture. The emphasis is on not just, as I said at the outset, the act of sex. It's about all this other stuff that we need to consider and take into develop an understanding of. I was very impressed with your launch event. You had all these different stakeholders, Corlin and Oak, Parents' Council, the Secondary School Students' Union, Department of Education were there, so they really got stuck in. They were really engaged and thought, the subject RSE and these resources are very, very important.
Absolutely. Once you give people a space to talk about these issues, they're really engaged. Because it's been a taboo for so long, if you create a safe space, then people are just, I suppose, really kind of jumping at the bit.
They want this agenda to evolve.
They do, and they want to tease out, because it can be complex. There are lots of new ideas, and people are not quite clear about stuff, and they just want to tease things out. So getting an opportunity to talk about this is really important. And the young people at the launch, from the ISSU and Corlin and Oak, they were really articulate in saying how much young people need these safe spaces to talk with their parents in the schools and in the community about these issues. And that, how those two particular groups are really advocating for, I suppose, a more open approach to relationships and sexuality, where they can get the support that they need, rather than just getting it from the internet or whatever. Again, the recent research that was launched from the ERSI, which looked at that really big longitudinal study of children growing up in Ireland, took out some of the data around relationships and sexuality. And one of the things they found was that at the age of 13, only about 7% of the young people were getting their information from the internet. But at the age of, that was at 13, sorry, at the age of 17, it was 20%. So the internet can be brilliant as a source of information, but parents and trusted adults are there to, I suppose, help the young person develop the ability to critically analyse what they're getting, to be a bit of a filter, so that if young people can hear those messages from the internet and then have some sort of perspective to compare them against. So it's really
a reality
important.
check.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And how does it fit with their own values and their family's values?
One of the very useful resources you launched back in November 2022 was the research summary that you were just talking about research there. So that's available on sexualwellbeing.ie as well. The research summary is the importance of parental communication in supporting children's and young people's relationship and sexuality development. So I think that's very important just to highlight to people that want to get deeper into that.
Oh, absolutely, because it sets out why. Because I think you were saying at the beginning, and it said in the video from the Making the Big Talks, Many Small Talks, why should I talk to my child about this? And the research tells us why. The research tells us that parents who talk to their children that young people are much more likely to delay for sex, and they're much more likely to use safer sex precautions when they do become sexually active. So, that's only one tangible
That's nearly
win.
the only sentence we need to keep saying, because any parent will latch on, for that reason alone.
But also, they're more likely to be happy, healthy human beings in their expression of their sexuality in all aspects of their life. So it's not just about avoidance, it's about the positive benefits.
Absolutely, yeah, that's good. So you've been working in this area in sexual wellbeing for a good few years now. What has your journey been like? You must kind of check yourself when you look at sexualwellbeing.ie now, that website. You wouldn't expect to see those things maybe when you, like, how many years are you working in this area? Put you on the spot.
Yeah. I'll tell people how old I am. So I've been working in this. This September it'll be 20 years. And I was a secondary school teacher before that.
So you came from working as a teacher in the education setting to work in the health setting and health promotion in the area of sexual health, to work back into the education setting. Did you feel like you were equipped with some insights and credibility to kind of work from one sector to the other?
Absolutely. I was quite a number. I'm not even going to mention the number of years because that will tell you my age. But I was quite a number of years working as a secondary school teacher and working with the age range from 12 up to 17 or 18. And it did give me a lot of experience of, I suppose, the diversity of young people coming into the sector and some of their needs in terms of relationships and sexuality development, and also of some of the types of approaches that might work with young people. But I would say that I'm out of the education sector for a long time now. So what's really crucial is our partnerships with our education kind of colleagues. It's really important, the work we do with the various parts of the Department of Education, the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment, and what was the PDST, the Professional Development Service for Teachers. So, having that connection with what's going on currently in schools, it's crucial. Absolutely. I think what was really positive was the development of the National Sexual Health Strategy back in 2015. It was the first National Sexual Health Strategy. And what it did was, it's not like the first time people worked in this area, because there was huge amounts of work going on in different parts of this area. But what it did was it actually provided a coherent framework for that work to kind of consolidate and grow and expand. So from 2015, the growth and development of the services and supports and information available around, a whole range of sexual health issues has been phenomenal. And any adult, the Sexual Wellbeing is the national website for adults over the age of 17. And if anyone is interested in the area or has questions or issues, there's a whole range of information there across the type of services available. For instance, the free contraception service scheme, which is now available to people, huge. 17 to 26. And then the STI home testing service.
Which again is a big move.
A massive breakthrough.
Yeah, who would have thought?
And it took a huge amount of work, I have to say, on the part of my colleagues and their clinical colleagues. But there's a whole range of information available on sexual wellbeing for parents, for the general public, for people interested in research, for professionals. We also advertise our training, for professionals. So it's well worth a visit.
So as we come to wrap up this podcast, Moira, give us 2 or 3 key messages for parents, just as the takeaways in this area, sexual health and relationships.
I suppose the first thing I would say to parents is to not be overwhelmed by it. This isn't that, you've got to go out now and learn all this stuff and, make it kind of your prime focus in life. So it's to take it gently. to take it gently and for your own sake and for your child's sake, and to have a look at the booklets, to have a look at sexualwellbeing.ie for parents, and to just maybe see how you can do a few small things in the course of your daily life that will actually build that connection and bonding with your child, that will actually make these conversations possible as they develop and grow. So that's really, really important. So the second point I'd say is that for parents to take care of themselves, because raising a child from birth through to the adult years can be a challenging business. It can be great and fulfilling and fun, and it can be hard and tough growing at times. So, it's to
self-compassion.
Absolutely. Take it easy. Find your supports. Find your friends who'll support you. Find the services who'll support you. And if you can, try to find some time for yourself.
So all the resources around sexualwellbeing.ie, like we keep saying, there's been a lot of effort to put into the design of the books. They've got these beautiful speech marks hanging down to kind of show that it's not one big talk. We've said it before, it's bite-size. Let's have lots of conversations about these things. Let's use the resources so that we feel we feel like our knowledge is built and our confidence is built to have these conversations with our children. So good luck to everybody on sexualwellbeing.ie. I expect everybody to check that out. So thanks very much, Moira, for taking the time to talk to us and bring your expertise and bring us through all these new resources. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Fergal.